Chapter 4, Sovereign Over All. In Chapter 2, I used the phrase, bitter providence. That's what the coronavirus is. To describe some of God's works as bitter is not blasphemy. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law who lost her husband, her 2 sons, and 1 daughter-in-law through famine and exile, said, "The Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. The Almighty has brought calamity upon me." Ruth 1:20-21. She was not lying, overstating, or accusing. It was a simple and terrible fact. Bitter providence is not a disparagement of God's ways. It's a description. I also said in Chapter 2 that the sweetness of God's Word is not diminished in the midst of this bitter providence. Not if we have learned the secret of sorrowful yet always rejoicing, 2 Corinthians 6:10. I said we would come back to this secret. Then I summed it up in a sentence. The same sovereignty that could stop the coronavirus yet doesn't is the very sovereignty that sustains the soul in it. Knowing this makes all the difference. So, is it true? What God wills, He does. My aim in this chapter and the next is to show that God is all-governing and all-wise. He is sovereign over the coronavirus. I want to show that this is good news. Indeed, it is the secret of experiencing the sweetness of God in His bitter providences. Saying that God is all-governing means He is sovereign. His sovereignty means that He can do, and in fact does do, all that He decisively wills to do. I say decisively because God, in a sense, wills things He does not carry through. He can express desires that He Himself chooses not to act on. In that sense, they are not decisive. He Himself does not let such willing or desiring rise to the level of performance. For example, consider Lamentations 3:32-33. Though He cause grief, He will have compassion, according to the abundance of His steadfast love. For He does not afflict from His heart or grieve the children of men. He does grieve us, but not from His heart. I take that to mean that while there are aspects of His character, His heart, that incline away from grieving us, nevertheless other aspects of His character dictate the holiness and righteousness of grieving us. He is not double-minded. There is a perfect beauty and coherence in how all of His attributes cooperate. But neither is He without complexity. His character is more like a symphony than a solo performance. So when I say that God's sovereignty means that He can do, and in fact does do, all that He decisively wills to do, I mean there is no force outside Himself that can thwart or frustrate His will. When He decides for a thing to happen, it happens. Or, to put it another way, everything happens because God wills it to happen. All-pervasive sovereignty. Isaiah teaches that this is part of the very essence of what it means to be God. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Isaiah 46:9-10. To be God is to cause His own counsel to stand, always. God does not just declare what future events will happen. He makes them happen. He speaks his word, and then he adds, I am watching over my word to perform it, Jeremiah 1:12, which means, as Job learned from hard experience, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted, Job 42:2. Or as Nebuchadnezzar learned from his merciful humiliation, all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? Daniel 4:35. Or as the psalmist says, whatever the Lord pleases, he does, in heaven and on earth, in the seas and all deeps. Psalm 135:6. Or as the Apostle Paul sums up, he works all things according to the counsel of his will, Ephesians 1:11. All things, not some things, and according to the counsel of his will, not according to wills or forces outside himself. In other words, the sovereignty of God is all-encompassing and all-pervasive. He holds absolute sway over this world. He governs wind, lightning, snow, frogs, gnats, flies, locusts, quail, worms, fish, sparrows, grass, plants, famine, the sun, prison doors, blindness, deafness, paralysis, fever, every disease, travel plans, the hearts of kings, nations, murderers, and spiritual deadness, and all of them do his sovereign will. Not a season for sentimental views of God. The coronavirus was sent, therefore, by God. This is not a season for sentimental views of God. It is a bitter season, and God ordained it. God governs it. He will end it. No part of it is outside his sway. Life and death are in his hand. Job did not sin with his lips when he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job 1:21. The Lord gave, and the Lord took. The Lord took Job's 10 children. In the presence of God, no one has a right to life. Every breath we take is a gift of grace. Every heartbeat, undeserved. Life and death are finally in the hands of God. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God besides me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal, and there is none that can deliver out of my hand. Deuteronomy 32:39. Therefore, as we ponder our future with the coronavirus or any other life-threatening situation, James tells us how to think and speak. You ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that, James 4:15. If he wills, we will live. If not, we won't. For all I know, I will not live to see this book published. I have at least one relative infected with the coronavirus. I am 74 years old, and my lungs are compromised with a blood clot and seasonal bronchitis. But these factors do not ultimately decide. God decides. Is that good news? Yes. I'll try to show why in the next chapter.